Been doing this on and off for about 5 or 6 years now, and slowly amassed a collection going to orchid shows. Got a lot of hanging orchids. This is orchids in their natural state, growing off pieces of wood or bark. The most beautiful thing right now is we have this beautiful Cattleya orchid. It's blooming. These are the types that you often see in wrist corsages. This one isn't quite open yet, still opening up, but very pretty plant. Big blooms. So in here we have orchids from all over the world. I like to collect species orchids, ones that actually exist in other places rather than created in a laboratory. This one here is from Mexico. It's called Laelia albida. See, it's very pretty. Just I like to see how the roots just sort of hang off there. Most orchids are what they would call epiphytes, which means they're not parasites where they leach nutrients or water from other plants, but rather they grow on the outside and just draw moisture from the air. So you can see the extensive root system that's growing here that will just sort of leach the moisture. This is a species that you see in Hawaii quite a bit. Just a typical Dendrobium orchid. This is the type of orchids that they make graduation leis out of. This is actually what the plant looks like. This is a Dendrobium also, although it's mounted onto this piece of wood, again with the extensive root system. Each of these canes will only flower and bloom once, then the leaves will fall off and new shoots will grow, but they serve as reserves of water and nutrients for the plant to draw from during the drought season. So as you can see, you don't cut them off, they just sort of draw from them until they're dry and skinny like this, then we can cut them off. But this is just a simple Phalaenopsis orchid, butterfly orchid or moth orchid they call them. You see these in flower shops and grocery stores all the time. This one's a...
Where are they from?
They come from all over, but a lot of them come from Hawaii and other very tropical regions like that. This is a really interesting orchid. This usually will only have one bloom per time per stem. An orchid like this only has a spike that comes out from one of these pseudobulbs. You only get one spike ever from one of these bulbs, but when it's done flowering you don't cut it. Each one of these little joints here is where a flowering took place at one point. So every single time you have a flower, you just leave it on there, it'll fall off and eventually it'll bud again. You know, the size of this is rather large.
Looks like a Megatron or something.
Right. It looks like a transformer. This is another form of Cattleya orchid. Just beautiful yellow little blooms on this one.
So what about this big one? What's that up there? The hanging one.
That one is, I think, a Brassivola orchid. They would call that something I forget. This is a Vanda orchid. These have beautiful, vibrant purple blossoms, and instead of blooming from an individual pseudobulb, this one is called a monopodial orchid, meaning there's one single stem, and every time there's a new layer of leaves, you'll always have another stem of orchids that come out. So eventually it'll just get taller and taller and taller. This one's a baby version of this one. It just happens to be growing on a piece of wood, and it got too cold for this one. Luckily this little guy survived, so I would call this one a specimen size because it's so large. And here we have a pod that's starting to open. This will be blooming soon. Then we've got another one here and here. So this is really going to be a beautiful plant when it starts to bloom. This one, interestingly enough, they call a coconut orchid. When it's blooming, it actually smells like coconut.
Don't recognize it, huh?
Can't read my own writing. This one's a genetic cross. This is a mix of two different orchids, not a species orchid. So water quality is also very important to good orchid raising. City water usually has a high mineral content, which when you mist orchids or shower them will leave mineral deposits on top of the leaves. So you want to use filtered water. So I actually have a reverse osmosis system hooked in down here, connected to this 50-gallon tank with a pump on it so that I can water everything with clean, fresh water. I always get the hanging ones first. Then you just soak it up the most. Orchids are used to being showered in tropical storms, never really submersed in standing water. So you can't put them in little trays or saucers like a lot of people do with houseplants.